Sounds like we are officially live for our first ever Talk It Out live stream session. I'm gonna kind of ramble a bit and wait for some people to join. Hopefully, I can't see anything though, so welcome if you're coming in. We're excited to have you here. I hope everyone's day is going well. I've been in Alberta and BC today, and the weather in both places has been really nice. So hopefully where you are, it's nice as well. Not sure if there's like a customary time allowance for waiting for people to join or protocol on this. Where DoMore is new to the live streaming events. So thank you again, everyone who is coming on to join us. This is exciting to be here. We've been planning this for a while, actually. We started kind of mid last year with conceptions and starting to pull this together. We're just checking on the technical side to make sure everything's working across all the platforms that we're trying to be streaming on right now. So if you did jump on early, thank you very much for just hanging out for a couple minutes while we get all of this figured out. Just gonna give it a couple more minutes. I'm getting updates from Hamadri to see if anyone's joined us yet. Sounds like we have a couple people that have joined us on Facebook. Thank you. Welcome. Just waiting on one more update and then I think we'll get things rolling. Oh, we've got some people joined on Twitter too. Thank you. Okay, it sounds like we have all systems are a go across all the platforms. Oh, no, not Instagram. So thank you for everyone else who's joined. We're gonna kick things off here. My name is Meg Reynolds. I am the Executive Director of the DoMore Agriculture Foundation, and we are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture. And joining me today is Akash Asif, and he is from the Center for Suicide Prevention. I'll let you introduce yourself further.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Akash Asif. I'm the Strategy and Operations Director with Center for Suicide Prevention. We're an education center, and our mission is really to equip people to be able to help and support those who may be considering suicide.
And we have been partnered with them for a while and really enjoying the partnership because it just goes hand in hand so well, the conversations that we're trying to have to break down the stigma and then what they're doing as well. And we actually worked over a year ago to help them design one of the characters for their Body Up program. And do you want to quickly program and so important for what we're going to be talking about today?
So can you repeat that, Megs? I think you were cutting in and out a bit there for me.
I was just talking about the Buddy Up program that you guys created and how we worked with you to create Farmer Clay, and wondering if you could talk a little bit about the program because it's so important for what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that men die by suicide. Thousands of men each year here, and when it comes down to the ratios, 3 times more often than women, and middle-aged men we know die by suicide more than anyone else. So the Buddy Up campaign really is geared towards promoting authentic conversations among men and their buddies there. So it's really asking men to be courageous enough, be challenged enough to approach someone they may be thinking about, or maybe they notice something that's going wrong with them, and then be able to have conversations, strike up conversations, and go through and support someone they may be worried about. So that's really the premise of Buddy Up. And you're right, Clay is our agriculture producer out as one of our characters. We have many different characters, each with their own stories and warning signs, and that's a population we really wanted to focus on as well with Clay.
Awesome, thank you. So what we are here to talk about today, our topic for January with our Talk It Out sessions has been suicide. And I'm going to get into kind of that conversation in a minute, but I wanted to say one message, since it's Bell Let's Talk Day, that I really want to personally put out there, and it is to check in on your friends, check in on your family members, your loved ones, even the ones that you don't think need it, and maybe especially the ones that you think are doing fine. I personally am really good at hiding things behind a smile. So just because I'm smiling doesn't mean that I'm always doing great. And that can be a defense mechanism for me. So even if you think someone looks like they're doing great on the outside or through social media, or when you run into them in town or at church or maybe a coffee row, just check in on them as well. And Akash, I'll let you say something too.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's such a great message there. And I think you really brought up a really great point with there's more to just the physical nature of someone and this smile into that. And sometimes there's just a lot going on and we might just portray like things are okay, but they're really not. But I think really for me, my message overall and my theme for maybe the conversation today is just going to be that anyone can support someone who may be considering suicide and is just having a difficult time. And I think really it's just challenging everyone to have difficult conversations that I know are very awkward, very, very hard to have. And then really just being able to create a safe space, and by doing that, so by actually sharing our own vulnerability as well. That's something that typically helps me when I want to help my buddies, and showing that I'm not doing too well or there's something that are not perfect with me is a great way to be able to connect with people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that. The vulnerability is a huge piece. It's such an easy, not easy in the sense of, sharing your own things sometimes, but quick way to create a safe place for somebody else, and be able to open up and let them know that that's okay, that they can have a conversation with you. I think that's a really good interlude into our conversation today. If we've talked about that someone may not show that they're struggling, but what could be signs that it's time to kind of check in with that friend or that family member or community member?
Yeah, I think there's certainly invitations when someone isn't doing too well, and really at the end of the day, any significant change in behavior or mood can be considered a warning sign. And someone may be thinking about suicide or may just not be doing too well. So it could be things like isolating themselves, or it could be things such as changes in sleep or eating patterns, not showing up or texting. I think the other thing to mention as well is just disconnecting, as well as disconnecting from hobbies as well that someone may have. One of mine that I think stand out to me a lot of the times is productivity in the work that you're doing as well. So if that drops and your output, for instance, is all of a sudden a lot lower than what you're used to, or even on the contrary, if it's a lot higher than what it is typically, I think that change is could be considered a warning sign, and it could be an invitation to have a conversation. But I think really from the agriculture side, I'd be curious to get your thoughts as well on because it is a different world, and some folks are just naturally isolated and just regionally. And what could that look like?
As you started describing some of those things right away in my head, I'm like, okay, well, that could be calving, that could be seeding, that could be a busy time on the farm where that just naturally is what has to happen to be able to do what has to be done on the farm at that point. And so I think that's where we in agriculture kind of need to increase that awareness, because you just listed so many things that could be the sign that something's going on. And it really opens the door that it's almost, if you see a change at all that stands out to you in someone, to reach out and to say, hey, I've noticed this. Are you okay? What's going on? In farming, that could be Maybe it's someone who during a busy season, they have a headset and they're often calling friends when they're in the cab of a tractor, combine, or sprayer, and they haven't called you in a while. Normally you hear from them maybe once a week or maybe once a day because they're a super social person, and you haven't received that call. So calling them instead, checking in on them. On farming too, or in agriculture, it could be that there's been changes to maybe the farm appearance itself. So maybe they were someone that always really prided themselves in making sure that around the tree rows in the front of the yard that they were rototilling to make sure that there was no weeds in the soil, and suddenly that's all overgrown. That could be a sign, unless it is a crazy time, that something is going on with that person. Have they pulled back from like Akash said, those social activities? So that could maybe in the winter, that's the rec hockey, or that's coffee row, or maybe that's church. Is that person not showing up there? And as well, social media. I mean, we've all been come so connected through social media. We're talking to you guys today through social media, but one of the things that I used to love when I was farming, and I still love Twitter, but farmers are one of the largest user groups on Twitter. So that's someone that was regularly posting, commenting, interacting on social media, and now suddenly they've disappeared. That could be a big sign that something's going on there.
Yeah, I think overarching, I think for me, it's just to explain it is to just, if everybody just pays attention to their surroundings and just actively engages, and then anything that makes you just think twice. I mean, just anything, it's worth having a conversation, just checking in on someone.
And we've talked about how it can feel awkward, and I think we all feel that way. We didn't grow up being taught about mental health. We weren't taught how to have conversations about mental health. We've been hardwired to, when someone asks you how you're doing, we're like, oh, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm good, right? It's just that automatic response. So maybe when you reach out to them, you could say, hey, look at the spring, for example, fuel prices just went on a run, fertilizer prices are just went crazy. I'm trying to figure out if I need to change my plan, and I'm overwhelmed and I'm stressed. How are you doing? And then that's opening that door. That's creating that vulnerability a little by saying, like, I'm reacting to these things that are out of my control, and I'm stressed about it. How are you doing? And letting that person know that they have a space that they can talk to you about what they're going through.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that I'll maybe just add on to that is just choosing a setting that you're comfortable with as well when you are going to be speaking with someone, because I know that sometimes we want to get right to it. We want to have that conversation, but it's looking within yourself on where you're going to have that conversation. So for instance, the place, is it on a coffee shop? Is it having a phone conversation? I mean, choose something that you're comfortable with, because I'll be the first to admit, I mean, I work with a center and I still think a lot of these conversations are very awkward. I have difficulties with them myself. And so choose a place that you're comfortable with. Your energy level is important. I mean, if it's something that needs to get done right away, that's a fair assumption. But if notice how much energy you have into the conversation, and just the timing of it as well. Like if it's a busy spot with 20 people all around you walking around, maybe not the most perfect, more perfect timing in that sense. Maybe it's better to kind of do it that one-on-one. It's just understanding what's around you and choosing something that you're comfortable with, as well as what you think will make the other person comfortable is important as well.
That's a very good point. And I think too, trying to factor in maybe the timing on their end as well. Like, when are they maybe most open to have that conversation, or in a better place to have that conversation? But then there's that fine line too of it's easy to say, well, the time's not perfect, to avoid the conversation. So, maybe when they've just come in from a long day and they've been in the barns all day, that's not the opportune moment to have it, unless you feel that there is no, like, you need to have it right then and there. One of the things I forgot to say at the beginning, please ask us questions. We have an incredible human Hamadri monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions, you can put them in the live streams, and they will make their way to us and we will respond to them. So we're here to be interactive and of course to answer any questions that might come up. So please ask. If you what could we all do kind of like in our own circles or in our day-to-day that helps maybe create a better atmosphere for people to feel comfortable reaching out for help? Or is there anything we can do outside of being more direct and trying to have those conversations?
Yeah, I think it's just I think social connection is a pretty big one. I think a lot of the times we get really busy with our day-to-day lives and the commitments that we have there, and oftentimes we don't get the time to check in on our friends and the people who are around us. So I just think one thing that really stands out to me, and I try to do as much as possible in my own personal life, is to touch base with my buddies and the people in my lives, whether that's grabbing coffee or whether that's just texting or having a phone conversation or just, I mean, I love playing squash as a sport. So playing squash with them and just being able to have those conversations, talk about how life is going. I mean, how work is going and sports are going. And I don't think, I think that's something that I just want to highlight here as well as, I mean, not every serious conversation has to be about suicide and mental health. I mean, it really, what we're trying to promote here is social connection. I mean, if someone needs that conversation, absolutely have it. But other than that, I think it should just be about how do you get beyond the surface, where if someone asks you how you're doing, you're not just saying great and you move on. Instead, you're actually going deeper into the question itself. So yeah.
Mhm. I've noticed that we do when we do workshops and stuff at conferences, I'll get people to spend time at their tables and have questions that we've created. And you can always see at the beginning that when people learn that they have to have these conversations and questions with strangers, that there's a little closed off, and then some nervous laughter because they're uncomfortable with it. But then as soon as they start talking, even if they're the one asking the question, and then being able to, once they've listened and everything, say something in return, that people really open up and they lean in and they engage and they feel a lot better. So we need that connection. We're not supposed to be isolated, to be on our own, and just having that surface level connection where it is just that, hey, how are you? Good, thanks, go about your day. That doesn't really do it, right? We need to be loved and feel loved and share life with each other. And we are here to talk about suicide and conversations, but to your point, there's so much that goes on in our lives, and we might not all get to a place where we could be diagnosed with a mental illness or we're having suicidal thoughts, but we're all going to have challenges with our mental health. We could have emotional shocks, we could have life changes. That could be going through a divorce. It could be maybe you're fifth generation farming and your decision for what is best for your family is to sell the farm. That's a massive life change, and being able to talk about that with people and have support for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, I think um, I will speak for myself, maybe not others, but people love to talk about themselves and we love to share our stories. So I think giving the floor and bringing in and creating that safe space, all it does is that connection. And I think it does a lot of good things for mental health for me and the people that I know.
Hmm. What's if you are worried about someone or thinking that they might be at a place where they're having suicidal thoughts, is there the best way to have that conversation, or is there something that you should say, or what
Yeah,
advice you have kind of around that area?
absolutely. So I think what I'll do is I'll maybe lean on a little bit to the Buddy Up campaign here as well, and the 4 steps that we employ over there. I think can be utilized everywhere there. I think really with having a conversation, I mean, our 4-step guide is really around first paying attention, right? So we've talked about that, noticing any changes in behavior and noticing any differences. And then I think next is to start the conversation. So choose a comfortable setting and then mention what you've noticed. And I know makes you mention sort of like, okay, you haven't been coming for coffee lately, or you haven't responded to my text. Is everything okay? So being able to have those conversations and then being able to ask questions and actively listening to them. And if you do figure out that the individual you're trying to get to have this conversation is not maybe not doing too well, it's important to continue on the conversation and not change the subject. So I think that, for instance, in our 4-step guide is I would say the most difficult, because I keep repeating myself. It is awkward. It is really awkward when someone tells you they're not doing well, and to carry on that conversation. So in that instance, it's important to continue listening, ask questions, not be judgmental. And if you are worried about someone and you are worried that they might be having suicidal thoughts, I encourage you to ask the question directly. Are you thinking about suicide? And although it's a very scary question to ask, it's a very difficult and awkward question to ask. Asking someone about suicide may even reduce the risk they may attempt. And for someone who is suicidal, it could be a huge release, a burden on them that they've been carrying with them. And it's finally someone's asked them, finally someone's willing to have a conversation with them about what they're dealing with and what they're feeling like. So that's how I would do it. After that fact, it's about supporting them, whether it's supporting them with constant check-ins, whether it's getting them the proper resources. We're friends, we're not necessarily counselors. Everyone can play a role. And according to our guide as well, if there are imminent plans to die, do call 911 and not leave them alone. But really, it's about asking the question, having check-ins, and giving them the proper resources that they may need.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, from our, other conversations that, we've had with yourself and others with the Center of Suicide Prevention, is that we having suicidal thoughts is a lot more common, I think, than people think. Like there are probably more individuals that might be in your social circle that have at one point in your life, and that I don't think necessarily means that they would be at a place where they were going to take it to a place where they were, trying or a danger to themselves, but that at some point, just because of what was going on in their life at that time, all of those factors, that they did, turn to some of those suicidal thoughts, or those did creep into kind of how they were talking to themselves.
Absolutely. No, it certainly comes in sometimes ebbs and flows, and it's someone might be thinking about suicide pretty significantly at one point, and that might not be the case for them later on. So it's always important to just check in, and then also have those conversations when they're needed, for sure there. And I guess for me, I'm just very curious as well, because if you have an idea, like for me, I like with agriculture and with farmers, oftentimes they might be kind of working alone or with a few people there. Like, how do you build that connection, and how do you pay attention? Like, do you have any thoughts on that, like with the community around you?
That's harder for sure. Your comment on like that isolation, there is a lot more isolation. You could spend even working in a family dynamic, a couple and a husband and wife working together, they could easily go most of the day without seeing each other, or 14 hours without seeing each other, just because of what is going on farm and everybody else's roles. So it can definitely be harder. I think that's where it really comes down to your comment on like paying attention, because you might only see that person at the grocery store, once a week or something, or you might, if you're working together on farm, you might just catch them when you're picking food up or dropping food off, or when you're having, kind of a meeting with the crew in the morning before everyone goes out and does their stuff. So to me, it could be, is that person trying to distance themselves more than is normal for that activity or that time of year on farm? If you're within, a circle that you spend enough time with them to notice that. And then I always think of the mental health continuum, where it breaks, we look at our mental health on a day-to-day, where if you're in the green, you are kind of able to take things in stride, you've got healthy sleep patterns, you're able to, maybe the combine blows a belt at harvest, and you're able to deal with that in a very level, moderate way. You'd have low alcohol consumption, and from there, with stress and different things going on, maybe lack of sleep because of the seasonality, maybe some of the other things that could be going on in your personal life. If your mental health starts to break down a little bit, you could be moving into the yellow and the orange, where you become more reactive, you have trouble focusing. For me, what I've noticed in agriculture is we spend with all the stress and the chronic stress and just the stigma surrounding mental health and not doing what we do or need to do for self-maintenance and taking care of ourselves, or being able to acknowledge and realize that something is going on where maybe we need professional help, that we spend a lot of time in that yellow and orange. And we've normalized that. So instead of seeing these things as flags that something is going on with like my personal mental health or maybe someone in my circle, we see them as characteristic traits. They're like, oh, Megs is always quick to react. You never want to take stuff to her. She always has had trouble focusing, procrastinator, what have you. So I think it's really about starting to understand that a lot of those things are little flags on the field that something is going on. And then being able to, when you do see those things, ask someone, hey, I've noticed this, your point, are you okay? Or what's going on? Like, let's have a conversation, because it is definitely harder in agriculture because of just the nature of the industry, with how much time we spend on our own. But then also all of those things that are out of our control and the different stresses or challenges within the industry that can add to what we're experiencing or how we're experiencing.
Right. And I know you mentioned the busy times, and I'm not too familiar with the industry. I'll be very honest here. Like, any thoughts or advice on how to manage it during the busy times? I'm curious if you've come across that.
Self-maintenance. And seasonality with agriculture, when those different times are coming. I was a grain farmer, so I revert a lot to kind of the grain farming seasonality. But before you go into harvest, you're going to get your combine out and you're going to go through it and you're going to check your fluids. You're going to check if there's any belts that might be blowing or going to blow soon. You're going to go through and make sure that when that day comes that you can get into that field because your crop's ready, that piece of equipment is as ready as it can be to perform the best that it can during that season. And we need to think of ourselves in the same way. Especially with agriculture, where, there are times of year where your sleep is going to be affected. You're going to be running on very little sleep for extended periods of time. So what can you do before you go into that season to take care of your mental wellness? And we don't have overall health without mental health. And I think that's something we often forget. It's like, okay, physically I'm fine, check the box, run away. But that mental health side, that mental wellness, that's that day-to-day in that battery. So if we're not able to take care of that and recharge that, then that's when we start getting worn down and can get into dangerous places. And with agriculture, with how much chronic stress some individuals can be carrying, there's been mental health experts that have said can be very scary, because it can just seem like one little thing, but then that's what puts that person kind of over the edge because of everything they've had on their shoulders. So yeah, what can you do to take care of yourself before you go into those busy seasons? And then what can you do during those busy seasons still for that self-maintenance? And maybe that's just being present when the tractor's warming up in the morning and taking 5 minutes to watch the sunrise and just watching the sunrise and enjoying that, and not focusing on running numbers or worrying about what commodity prices are doing or things like that. But being able to, be present in that moment. Maybe that means going out and tinkering in the shop. I've, bad years where things are, drought years where we're hardly pulling any crop off, and it's, really overwhelming and sad to be out at harvest because how bad it is. I've put tape over the yield monitor in the combine. So are there boundaries that you can set up that kind of help protect you as well? And I know for some, social media can be great, and for others, maybe that means not going on social media, because maybe in other places they're having a perfect year and they're going to have bumper crops, and you're dealing with a drought year, and being subjected to that over and over isn't going to be helpful for your mental well-being.
Awesome. That's great. I love the analogy of you got to get ready for yourself, just like with machines and other things. So.
Well, I've tried to, because again, there's so much stigma in just around mental health in general, but there's more in agriculture. Very, very stoic, cowboy up. You don't show emotion, because that could be, likened with weakness, or you could see yourself as less of a farmer, which is not true. But yeah, so it's how do we soften some of the ways that we talk about stuff, because self-care obviously became a really big topic, especially during the pandemic, where life was crazy and we were trying to teach from home and do everything from home. But self-care doesn't work with everybody, right? So maintenance is a term that, you know, might be better, and it might help someone. Maybe you're worried about you know, a male in your family. We've already talked about how, you know, higher rates of suicide. And so maybe that's a way that you can leave this conversation and go talk about how that person needs to find a way to refill their cup and take care of their mental wellness on a day-to-day, but talk about self-maintenance instead of self-care. And maybe that's less fluffy and opens the door to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Are there any other there was one thread this summer on Twitter about someone showing up on farm. They might have, I believe they're an agronomist, and they realized right away that the farmer wasn't doing great. Like there was something different about the farmer, and they were able to come up right out and say, like, are you okay? Like, I'm worried about you. And the farmer said, no, I'm not. And their next question was, can we call a crisis line together? So is that something that you would, you know, if someone's feeling uncomfortable with their ability to support someone, is that kind of maybe that next place to say, hey, I'm here with you, but I don't feel prepared to have this conversation. Can I help connect you to somebody that is?
Yeah. Yeah, and I find it really interesting too, because you mentioned this sort of cowboy up and the stoic nature of a lot of these individuals potentially. And I think for me it's interesting because I think if you're going to talk about cowboying up or manning up, that those are some terms we hear. Like, I would say, like, some of these conversations about mental health are probably more challenging than a lot of other conversations and things that you're actually doing. And like, that's where the whole be courageous enough to have these conversations comes in, right? If you want to cowboy up, and if you want to sort of man up, like, man up by actually asking people how they're doing and having those conversations and being able to support someone, because it is awkward. It's scary. It's awkward. You don't want the answer to be yes when you ask, are you thinking about suicide? And to be able to manage all that within yourself, like, that takes a lot of effort and courage to be able to do that as well.
I really like that. Kind of flip it, instead of feeling like it's you have to hide that or you have to shy away from it. Like, use that as like, yeah, here, just have the conversation. Be courageous, be brave enough to ask the questions and to be there for that person.
Yeah.
There's you know, just to kind of bring this back to agriculture and to where we're at in agriculture. The University of Guelph did a follow-up study on mental health in Canadian farmers. And in 2021, so of course influenced a little bit by the pandemic, but what they found was that 1 in 4 Canadian producers felt like their life was not worth living, wished that they were dead, or had thought about taking their own life in the last 12 months. So it's so important that we're having this conversation, and all the work that you guys are doing, because it's and it's not that, I wouldn't say that our industry, the mental health challenges in our industry have suddenly gotten worse. Of course, pandemic influenced everybody, but we're talking about it now, right? We're having conversations. We've got research now that we didn't have in the past. And so we're finally starting to, I'd say, move the needle on the stigma, at least the external stigma.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand that you know, with statistics like that, there's more than one person in your social circle and family that could be in that place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned the pandemic as well there. And I think it's something that we're seeing in a lot of different industries and sectors where it's opening up conversations a lot more now. And I think we're getting to the point where I think prior to the pandemic, if you ask someone, hey, how are you doing? I mean, if you weren't doing too well, you were sort of the anomaly in that sense. Whereas now, I think, or during the pandemic in the last several years here, like, if you're the one who's doing well, like, now you're the anomaly, because it's not easy to be doing okay. And so I think I'm hoping, and I'm hoping the momentum continues, and I'm curious to kind of get any more insight that you have. But I think we're seeing that across various sectors and very male, sort of stoic, um, sort of culture dominated industries as well, such as construction, for instance,
Mhm.
where we're seeing that shift and people willing to have those conversations. And yeah, is that how it's happening in agriculture? And I think what makes it, and then my question with that is just because it goes back to that people are isolated more quickly and being able to catch up on people and being able to have those connections. But has that conversation started to open up at all?
For sure. 7, 8, 9 years ago, we definitely would not have been sitting here having this conversation. And if we were, there wouldn't be anyone on the live chat right now hanging out with us. But what I've really noticed, last summer we went back to in-person events, in-person farm shows, and really heartened by people that would come up and say, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we're finally talking about mental health. It's so important. I support, anyone to do what they need to do to take care of their mental health. I support people to talk to a professional if that's what they need. And then they quickly follow that with, but I would never need to talk to somebody. And so to me, that really speaks to it's easy just to look at stigma as one thing, but I like to see it as external and internal. And so that external stigma is what keeps me from booking a therapist appointment in the town I live in, because I don't want someone to drive by and see my truck there. I'm worried that, I don't want anyone to know what's going on. I think we've taken large strides breaking down that external stigma. Your point of, we're talking about it. More people are being open about, having challenges. We're seeing that in agriculture as well. More people sharing their own stories. But when it comes to the internal stigma, I think that's where we're still struggling a lot. And for me, that's the piece that keeps me from being able to acknowledge and then accept that something's going on that I need help with. And acknowledging and accepting are two very different words. And you can have all the external support in the world. Your family can be there trying to get you help, but until you're able to realize that what's going on with you and that you're at a place where you need help, that's to me the hardest and where we need to do the most work.
Yeah, no, that's really great there. And I think you mentioned that the truck outside of, let's say, mental health resources. And I think that issue of confidentiality is I think huge in that sense. And you don't want to be known as the person in that sense. I think it's important wherever community it is to be able to access mental health supports however you need them. It doesn't have to be just in person as well, whether it's phone and whatnot there and we're online. I think the other thing that I want to just pick up on a thread on that is I also think with stigma, I also think it's important to really acknowledge incremental small wins as well there. I think oftentimes, our goal and a lot of the work that we do as well is based on big grand change and everybody being okay to talk about suicide and everybody being able to offer help and seek help. Well, all of that's sort of the ideal situation and what we want to create there. I think it's also important, whether you're doing it on a personal level or a community level, to sort of really factor in those incremental successes. So for instance, if you all of a sudden held a little event and 2 people showed up to an event, that's more than 0, and if people all of a sudden are acknowledging that mental health is a concern to community, like that's better than maybe when they were not acknowledging it. So being able to sort of see those successes and being able to build upon that is incredibly important as well, both on a personal and community lens, in my opinion.
Yes, I completely agree. I like to say that it's one conversation at a time. Like we're trying to change culture, and it's one conversation at a time. And it's, anyone that's been listening, hopefully they have takeaways that they can take. And even just with yourself and I, like what can we do in our daily lives? And maybe that means checking in on a couple extra people or sharing more of ourselves to some of our friends to create that safe space.
Absolutely.
I had one other point, and now I'm trying to remember it. But I think we've covered a lot of ground. And I want to thank everyone who's been here today. Akash, do you want to tell people where they can find more information on Buddy Up or about the work you guys are doing?
Absolutely. So for Buddy Up, you can visit www.buddyyup.ca. I encourage everyone to learn more about the campaign, become champions, and just get involved with promoting suicide prevention and awareness there. And before we do drop off, I just want to highlight the Talk Suicide Canada National Crisis Line number here. So if you or someone you know is struggling or maybe needing assistance or additional support, do call the crisis line, which is 1-833-456-4566 there. So it's Talk Suicide Canada. And if you need help, know that someone is available.
Thank you for sharing that. And if you're looking to learn more about mental health in agriculture and Do More itself, or to be connected with resources, we try to bring all the resources that are there, all the different phone numbers by national and then provincial on our website. And you can find us at domore.ag. Thank you everyone who has visited us today and hung out for this. Such an important topic, especially today when, focus of today is on mental health. And Akash, thank you so much for joining us and just for the partnership that we have with you guys. We really appreciate it.